Hey, team players, it's Joe and Bob here talking about the LA Rams this year. And Bob, as I look at what this team is really presenting themselves to do, to me, this is the ultimate question. How good is McVay? Because the roster he was handed is not what you would call loaded by any stretch of the imagination. And when we look at this team, especially on defense, aside from Aaron Donald, there's nothing really there. The whole stars and scrubs roster he had kind of lost its stars. And the question that I have, and this is going to define the entire division and quite frankly, the next 3 years of the Rams, what's McVay? Is McVay able to build players up and take teams that, we're not sure are any good and take them the distance? Or is it going to be he's just you give me what I get, I'll make you as good as the ingredients are? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of coaches in this NFL, the other one in LA, for instance, that make their teams worse than what their ingredients are. So just by keeping things status quo puts them in the top half of coaches. Not criticizing that at all, but the question is, can he elevate? Because you're going to go through the individual players here. The fact they haven't had a first-round draft pick in basically forever is really showing it. And I go through who some of their second-round draft picks are, which really was their first of each draft. We're looking at Cam Akers, a right tackle, who actually is good. We're looking at another offensive lineman. So there's some mid-value in this line, but there's not the star power that took off. I mean, even Cooper Kupp here was a third rounder. So Van Jefferson being a second rounder, he should be much better than he is. So I'm pointing this out because the Rams need to dominate day 2 of the draft and day 3 especially. And I'm not seeing the players step up. Van Jefferson should have been much better than he was. I mean, for crying out loud, their slot receiver this year is going to be a 7th-round draft pick. Like, the roster building of this team has a lot to be desired.
So before you
but they built the line, though. At least they think they fixed their line. And if you have an offensive line, you have a chance.
Before you continue to go down that rabbit hole, I will say a couple of things about the Rams from last year that we've seen and that the stats prove to us. Number one, they were by far and away one of, if not the worst scoring team in the league. Now, this goes hand in hand with the Stafford injury as well. Stafford got hurt. He got hurt again. And the team never really gelled. Then once, the offensive line started experiencing injuries, almost everybody on the offensive line went down. They only had one player on the offensive line that played all 17 games last year. Then you take a look, Cooper Kupp went down. So a lot of these big-time weapons that they paid for to have, that they sacrificed their team to get to win the trophy when they won it, they all got hurt last year at almost the exact same time, if not a week after something else happened. And so you look at what happened to them on offense, and I'm going to give them a pass on offense from last year. Last year,
quarterback.
Last year was abysmal for them. If, insofar as Matt Stafford is healthy and Cooper Kupp is healthy, I think Van Jefferson will be just fine to figure out a role within this offense. I wouldn't want to thrust him back into a starting, as my main top wide receiver.
I agree with that.
I think he'll be just fine where he's at. And I don't mind Ben Skwarnik. I don't know how to say his name correctly, but I do like the player. And like you said, they did pick up some people in the draft. Now they also went out, they drafted a guard, they got him. Their line sucked last year. There's no way to say that it didn't because it was hurt.
But their line last year is a testament to every single thing that you've been saying. If there is chaos behind you, you look worse as a line. And worse. That's what they were, man. It was chaos.
And then think about it. They cycled through at least 3 running backs last year due to injuries and terribleness. And the team did not gel on offense. The savior of this team was its defense, which we're going to get to right now. Is the defense has gotten worse.
Oh,
They've
dramatically.
lost Jalen Ramsey, who was not his phenomenal self last year, but he was still really good. And the only really talent piece that you kept from this team last year was Aaron Donald. So
True.
you look and you say, okay, do I have something to build around? Aaron Donald is something to build around, but did you give them enough? And in order for the Rams to have a good season this year, their offense has to stay healthy, because this defense is not going to win you games the way it's constructed currently. And with the current situation that it's in, unless these guys decide to play higher than what we think their capabilities are, then they'll be okay. And this is where it goes back to Sean McVay as a coach.
But can I put a timeout to put an explanation on your point right here? They don't have a safety on their roster that was drafted before the 6th round.
Yeah. And
like,
Joe,
what the hell are they doing?
Teams can be successful with players that have been undrafted or players that have, been drafted in later, later
one
rounds.
or two, and that's why Joshua Cribbs is a great story. Not the key to your defense.
The issue with this defense, as it's constructed, is that the only 3 players on their team that are above a 70 according to PFF are Aaron Donald, one of their linebackers, and one of their cornerbacks. Everybody else is 70 or lower, and most of them are 65 and lower. So if you're looking at these numbers according to PFF, you're ranking out both their run-stopping capabilities and their pass-stopping capabilities. This is not a good team on paper. Just like we look at the Jets and we say that's a good team on paper, just like we look at some of Detroit, that's a good team on paper. But we look at this team on paper, and you're saying to yourself, if the Arizona Cardinals were not in this division, this would be the last place team. If you were to say, going into this year, what's going to happen? The only saving grace that this team has is that offense could come back and start scoring points again. Now, the player in this team that I think matters the most this year, and we say it all the time when it comes to keeping defenses off the field, is your running game. Cam Akers has to control the ball this year. Whoever is behind Cam Akers, is the depth chart says Kieran Williams right now. Those 2 players have to control the ball, because this defense cannot see the light of day. They just can't keep putting this defense on the field. And I will almost guarantee that the Rams offense will put up as many points as their defense gives away. Regardless, these games are going to, I think these games, if all is said and done with this offense and every member of this offensive line stays healthy and all of the members of this offense only miss maybe 1 or 2 games, not like what happened last year, and they don't all miss it at the same time, you can see the Rams spitting off a couple of wins here. I don't think they're going to get higher than 6 wins based off of their schedule.
Well, the schedule is the AFC North and the NFC East. I can see these guys being a pain in the ass the NFC East. Well, I don't see them beating Philly. I'm not being crazy here.
No.
But Dallas is prone to lose a shootout.
Yeah.
Washington's very similar to them. Bad defenses that don't do a lot.
But here's the thing. They won 5 games last year, and that was due to their defense.
It was also due to they didn't have a quarterback.
Now.
They really didn't.
Now.
These guys were the Denver of the NFC, just with a worse defense.
But when you look at it now, you have the offense. So if you can score, then you can hopefully, and you can control the ball, you can hopefully keep the other team's offense off the table. And this offense is fully capable, when healthy, to keep another team's offense off the field. And that's what they need to do. And this is what Sean McVay will need to do in order to prove himself as a head coach, to say, okay, I didn't just buy my trophy. Like a lot of fans outside of LA are saying that they did.
And if you look at when they won that Super Bowl, they ran the ball. I mean, granted, they Goff, but they ran the ball in the one where they got there with Goff. And then the one that obviously Donald won for them with that sack at the end of the game, it was still a controlling team to get it there. They don't really have a backup running back either. I mean, their backup right now, according to our lads, which is a very good depth chart site, is Williams, who's a 5th-round pick from last year's draft.
Right.
Here in Williams. So when I look at this team overall, I do agree with you. I think that Cam Akers is the key. But given the fact that they're playing the East, I think there's a chance that they go 4-2 in their division. I think everyone's sweeping Arizona. So that's 2 right there. And I can see them sawing off the other 2. They play San Francisco crazy good. They always have. It's their big come-up game, as it should be. And when I look at this, if you get 4 wins from your division, I don't think it's out of the world to get 2 from the East to beat either Dallas
where I don't
or the
think
Giants.
It's realistic, where I don't think that prediction is realistic. I don't think they beat Seattle twice.
No, it's Seattle once. Seattle once, San Francisco once, Arizona twice.
Yeah, I can see that because that's what they did last year.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they did last year.
And then you get 2 from the East. You beat Cleveland. I mean, everyone beats Cleveland. All right, now we're talking about 7 wins. Your saw-off games are the other third-place teams here, which are going to be from the South. It's going to be Atlanta, I believe. And, that's a winnable game. And then who's the one from the North? Who was third in the North? The Packers. And, that's going to be a toss-up. Those 2 teams are the opposite, really. Denver's Green Bay is a team that needs their defense to finally show up because it's got all the first-round talent, and these guys got no first-round talent in the same results. Saying it out loud like that, maybe there is some crazy wisdom to this. Just why waste a first-round pick on defense? It doesn't work for Green Bay.
I mean, it's strange to say it, but when the smoke clears, that we're going to see the Rams and a lot of fans who stick with the Rams, I think, will agree to this, is that they're excited that the offense is coming back potentially healthy. They're excited about the potential of Van Jefferson. This is a make or break year for Van Jefferson. If he doesn't do well, it's gone. It's done. It's not going to happen. I think this is also your make or break year for Cam Akers.
It is.
I hate to use the phrase make or break when it comes to him, but it is. And
all that craziness they had during the season about him getting benched, not wanting to play and all that, and then them overcoming it in the second half of the year. Quite frankly, he won my league for me because I never cut it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I that when we spoke about the Rams that I spoke about with Sean McVay, and just paraphrasing that I don't think he's as good as we all thought he was. And
Akers or McVay?
McVay. I don't think he's as good as we thought he was. I think that the allure of the Super Bowl, catching it early, but he's gotten a bad swing of things recently, especially last year with his team, where all those injuries happen. I think if you get that controlled, this is a very winnable conference. We're a winnable division. I think it's very winnable for them. And if they have these division games swing their way, I don't realistically think that they have a chance to get more than 6 wins. But I could also see a scenario where they do better than we thought, and we could see them potentially fighting for a wild card spot later down the line. I don't think that's realistic enough, but I'm not writing that out of the books because the offense that they're putting on the field, if it's healthy, we have seen be explosive. I mean, they did put up 51 points on Denver's defense last year towards the end of the year. So, and that is a potential high ceiling for them. And it was with a team that, Denver struggled too, but their defense wasn't that bad, and they just whitewashed them. And that was a shock. And that was with Baker Mayfield, right? So with Matt Stafford coming back, Matt Stafford we know is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield.
Sure is.
With Cooper Kupp back, with all of these weapons now turning it on and potentially firing on all cylinders, a realistic expectation could be that they could take second place in this conference or in this division. But I just don't see it because of the strength of the other 2 top teams in this division.
I think that's totally fair. And as a gambling note to give about the Rams here, because you go when you're doing your analytics of building a spread, you go off the roster depth and the roster strength. These guys, quite frankly, might have the worst roster in the NFL, certainly in the NFC. And as a result, I believe that the LA Rams are going to lead the entire NFL in a stat that no one cares about except for the gamblers in underdog outright wins. There's not going to be too many games that are a favorite, and it might only be 6. But I'm not being crazy. I'm not saying this team's making the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're flirting with 500 just because of McVay. I mean, you don't get to a Super Bowl twice in 5 years by accident.
But I think in the NFC, flirting with 500 is flirting with a playoff spot.
In the NFC, it might be. Yeah, I guess this NFC is bad, but I don't see them getting when push comes to shove. I don't see them outrunning Seattle.
Well, I agree with that statement, but I want to go to the wider scope of things. So you know that only one team's coming from the South. Basically, everybody agrees that one team's coming from the NFC South.
Yeah, they might only have 4 wins.
You potentially have 2 scenarios now where you have, if it even is possible, and I don't think it is, where you have 2 or potentially 3 from the NFC North, potentially.
Maybe.
You potentially could see again 3 teams from the NFC East.
The East has too hard a schedule.
I know. That's why I'm saying.
I think the Giants are going to get swept by the AFC East.
This just feels like a scenario that if we want McVay to prove himself and he ends up proving himself as a head coach, being able to elevate, how he said good coaches make average players better.
Mm-hmm.
This is the perfect scenario for McVay to prove that him and his staff can coach up these guys from being what we believe are scrubs to then excelling at a different level. And I think that he's in the right division because, I mean, you look at what happened last year. I didn't think that Seattle would lose a game going for the rest of the season, and they ended up losing to the Rams. And it was John Wolford's game, I believe. And you just stare at yourself and you say, what just happened? Was this actually a thing? So, there's hope.
I look at their schedule coming down the stretch here. So I'm going to disclose this. I think Lamar will be hurt by the time they play them. But in week 12, Cardinals, then they host Cleveland, who, quite frankly, will be in implosion mode. I think Lamar will not be playing in week 14. You have the Commanders, the Saints, and then you go to the Giants week 17. That's potentially right there. I mean, that stretch will define their season.
Depending on how those teams have shaken out, if Carr ends up gelling with Olave, that could be a dangerous offense.
Well, I think that the Saints one's clearly the hardest one of that group.
And then Saquon's health. He was healthy all of last season for the most part. Is Daniel Jones going to develop? These are all questions. Every team has these question marks. And I think if the Rams defense can elevate themselves to the next level and do things that they did well last year, like stopping the run, then you are in a great place to be successful. But unfortunately, the weakest part of their defense is their defensive backfield. Yeah. And that's what San Francisco and Seattle both,
Seattle's got themselves 3 real receivers now.
They both quite frankly, I don't think that whatever they put back there would be able to stop either Seattle or San Francisco's passing game. I think that will all have to start in the front, and that's where Aaron Donald is such a valuable piece. So
that's absolutely it. And we're going to dive into those teams a little bit later on in the week here. But yeah, so Bob, I agree with you. I think that the best way they win is pass rush, and that's where it's going to come down to with them. And if they can develop a second guy, this thing can get crazy. Get real crazy.